A couple of weeks ago, I spoke on Peter. Jesus shows up and says to Peter, "Follow me," and he drops everything, his whole fishing business, and he runs after Jesus. Remember that? Jesus said, "I will make you a fisher of men, not a fisher of fish." We didn't get to that point a couple of weeks ago, so today we're going to continue to talk about Peter, and we're going to see how he became a fisher of men and fulfilling what Jesus said. So that's kind of where we're going. So Jesus breaks the stereotypes of the sacred and the secular. He breaks the shame and redeeming smell. That sounds kind of a weird thing. I wrote this Facebook deal. Maybe you read that, but talk about that. It's actually one of the most practical points I'm going to make today is how we can help redeem someone's memory of an event to be associated with forgiveness and grace instead of shame and guilt. Okay? Got a story about that. And then Jesus breaks expectations of following Jesus. I mean, what does it mean to follow him? So kind of where we're going here. We'd been tracking Peter's, he was born in Bethsaida, he got married, he has kids, he meets Jesus. Jesus says, "Follow me," and he just follows him. Now, about AD 31, 32, he goes to, Jesus takes his disciples to Caesarea Philippi. And one of my points here today is that where something happens, very important. Okay? Very important. I was in Texas 4 or 5 years. My wife and I lived in the Dallas area. I went to seminary there, and we used to lead wilderness trips to New Mexico, Oklahoma, sometimes with church groups, sometimes with juvenile delinquents, which was like quite the deal. But anyway, I remember driving this van full of kids all across New Mexico, and you're kind of dazed and sleepy, and you pull into the rest stop, and you get out, and you just got that driving fog over you. And this lady that was leading whatever group it was that we were taking, rock climbing and backpacking, she comes up to me face to face. "You want Alvarado to spell you for a while?" And I'm like, "What? You want Alvarado to spell you for a while?" And I'm like, so embarrassing. I mean, she's 12 inches from me. I have no idea what she's saying. But I perceived it was a question. So one more time, I'm like, "What? You want Alvarado to spell you?" And I'm like, all I could figure out is no is probably the best option here. So I'm like, "No thanks." What she was saying in Southern hospitality is, "Do you want Al or I to spell you?" I'm like, John, I'm good. "No, to give you a break behind the wheel. Do you want me to drive for you?" Al was the other guy. "Do you want Al or I to spell it?" Anyway, so it took me a long time. So the point was, where I was necessary to translate the Texan lingo about, do you want a break from driving? So, likewise, when the disciples go to Caesarea Philippi, it's a big deal. I'm going to read Matthew here. We're going to be in Matthew 16 and John 21 in about 15 minutes. So, Matthew 16, starting in verse 13. Kind of a very famous passage here. I'm going to dig into some of this stuff. But my point is, where this passage happens unlocks the passage. We don't normally think that way, okay? Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They said, "Well, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, others say Jeremiah or one of the prophets." Jesus said to them, "But who do you say I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Boom! Just like Peter. There it is. Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who's in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, Petros, and on this rock I will build my church." A little wordplay, because Peter's name means rocky, so Jesus is doing a little fun wordplay. "And the gates of hell shall not prevail against it, or shall not withstand it." The gates of hell shall not withstand the church that he's being built. So, this is what's going on here, and the place is significant. All right? Caesarea Philippi is way up here in the north. There's another Caesarea, and that's way down here. This is Caesarea Maritime because it's by the ocean, water. So this is called Caesarea Philippi. It's in the district that Philip runs, and so it's just called Caesarea of Philip. That's why it's called Philippi, okay? So that's where it is. It's far away from Capernaum, Bethsaida. This is where Jesus hangs out, And for some reason, he takes his disciples on a 32-mile round-trip hike to this place where he says, who do people say the Son of Man is? Who do you say I am? On this rock, I'll build my church. So my question is, where does this happen, and does the place have anything to do with the text? And it does. It's incredible. It unlocks the text, okay? So Caesarea Philippi was a very, very perverted place. It was basically, if you've studied the Old Testament, you're familiar with Baal or Baal, the fertility god, the sexual perversion of the Old Testament. This is the New Testament equivalent of that, okay? Caesarea Philippi, you have the gate of Hades, the gate of hell was here. It was a place, it was a thing. It wasn't just some figure of speech, and also rock of the gods. So this is the gate of hell. Everybody in Caesarea Philippi understood this was where Baal from the Old Testament would come out from the depths of the earth and go back to the netherworld. This was the literal place where the demons would come and go from. So that's just what they understood. All right? They also had the rock of the gods. If you can see closer, these little shrines carved out into the rock. Here's a closer look. They would have idols in there, fertility objects. It's very perverted, so I can only be vague. But they would run around with large phalluses and do sexual perverted things as part of their worship, okay? So again, this is the New Testament version of some Old Testament darkness. They worshipped Caesar. They worshipped a god named Pan, and Nemesis, and some other gods for their fertility. So when Jesus is hanging with his disciples and he says, hey, we're going to go to Caesarea Philippi. You got a bunch of 20-year-old guys. They're like, yeah, I don't think I should go. I mean, because we all know what's there. Okay, interesting, right? So this is his deal. Caesarea Philippi, 32-mile round trip. And interesting. So this is where he says, I tell you, you are Peter on this rock. Now, my question is, what rock? What is Jesus pointing to? Who is Jesus pointing to when he says this? I mean, we'll get into the different theories, but, you know, a lot of Catholics think, well, he's pointing to Peter. Or some people say, well, he's pointing to himself, or he's pointing to the words. Anyway, I think the place really unlocks this. So Jesus takes his disciples to the rock of the gods to show them that he is God of the rocks and God of everything else. There is no place on the planet that is off limits to the gospel. All right? It's like a graduation ceremony just before he leaves. So my question is, what would happen if Jesus doesn't take his disciples here? Think about this. If Jesus doesn't go to Caesarea Philippi, well, there's no way they're going without him. And so all of a sudden, Christianity is for people who are just not perverted. I mean, if you're perverted, well, just go away because you're not included. You see, you get this weird division. Now, this is kind of tricky because, you know, you don't have to delve into the sinful world to reach the sinful world, but it's broader than you might think. I'll get to that point here. So let me just keep rolling here. What does it mean? All right? I don't believe Peter was the rock. What was Jesus pointing to? Catholics say he's pointing to Peter. We live in a Catholic town, so I'm just going to slow down here, and I really want to walk you through this so we can understand and think clearly, maybe talk to some people that we know that think Peter was the focus of this passage. Protestants, evangelicals, the words, the truth. Peter had just confessed, well, you're the Son of the living God. So maybe Jesus is pointing to those words or the truth that he confessed. Or maybe it's evangelical Jesus pointing to himself. All of these have obviously some elements that you can figure it out, but most of them are kind of clunky. I mean, if Jesus wanted to say Peter, why does he use different words? I mean, that's not very helpful. You know what I mean? And the truth, calling the truth a rock when Jesus had just called Peter a rock, that's not helpful. So there's a lot of things that seem forced when you're trying to come up with some of this, okay? And so where I'm going with this is, get this, you ready for this? Jesus could have been pointing to a rock when he said, on this rock, I'll build my church. right? The rock of the idols of the fertility god, saying, on the worldview, there's no place that's untouched by the gospel, by my church. The gates of hell represent all the death and all the false gods. And Simon Peter says, you're the son of the living God. I love the contrast between the death represented by these idols and the living God that Jesus says he is, okay? You got to appreciate that. That's where he's going. And he's saying the living church will go Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth, including Caesarea Philippi. There's no place that's off limits. There might be some places that's off limits to in our minds. For instance, years ago there was a movie. I just can't get into horror movies. I just don't. I need explosions and fast-moving things. Then I'm excited. It's a great movie, right? But this movie was called The Exorcism of Emily Rose. It was about a demon possession and the exorcism, and a Christian produced this movie. I read a review, an interview with this producer, and this Christian film producer said, of all people, Christians should be doing horror movies because we understand the power of the true living God. And I'm reading this going, what? I mean, I'm trying to understand, buddy, but I just can't get on board with that. But anyway, what I'm saying is that here's a guy who was going to the Caesarea Philippi of his industry, horror movies, and saying, I'm going to be a bright light. And I'm like, I'll pray for you. I just can't go there, okay? There are other people doing other ministries that you and I might be like, I can't help you with that, but I'll pray. And so I want to stretch your comfort zone a little bit in understanding what is our Caesarea Philippi, where we just kind of turn a blind eye and we're like, well, we just don't go talk, okay? Anyway, and obviously there are some limits, right? There are some limits. Well, we really don't go there. That's not helpful. Okay. Anyway, just so you make sure we hear that. So Jesus could have been pointing to that rock, saying the worldview, all the dead end gods, my church is going to be right here. And I want you guys to know that before I leave, so you don't leave this place and places like this out. All right? So, and that's the historical. He could have been pointing to the actual rock where fertility gods are, the pagan values of their culture. And that makes a lot of sense. Why would he go 32 miles? He doesn't need to go 32 miles just to say, hey, Peter, you're a big shot and you're going to play an important role. You don't have to walk 32 miles to say that, right? Anyway, so I think where they are really matters. That's my point. If you guys, I appreciate this church because you take God's word seriously. And here's a challenge. You need a good Bible atlas. So when you're reading Scripture, you go, where is this happening? Here's another example, okay? Love this one. It's called the Markan secret. You're reading through the Gospel of Mark, and Jesus does a miracle, and he says, shh, don't tell anyone. The next page, he does a miracle. Go tell what great things I've done for you. Then the next page, shh, don't tell anyone. You know, what is going on here? It's called the Markan secret, and the key to that is geography. When Jesus is in Jewish territory, he says, shh. He doesn't want the news of the Messiah to preempt his ministry. So he's like, don't tell people that the Messiah is here, because then my work is going to be shortcut. But when he's in Gentile territory, there's nobody expecting the Messiah. So tell everybody. Okay, so geography really does matter. Okay, just want to drive that home. There's a lot of other stories that are kind of fun too. I found this in a commentary. In light of the massive rock scarp against which Caesarea Philippi was built, into which were hewn images of dead gods, you've seen those, Jesus may have been using Petra rock to refer to the worldviews represented in that rock face. They appear to be insurmountable, but here Jesus was declared to be the living God. So it's, I think that's the best way to take this passage, that he's saying on this rock, the idolatrous worldview, his church will even triumph that, okay? The center of pagan worship. And this is, in fact, what they do, right? When Jesus leaves, these disciples go all over the world. They're persecuted, they're hated, they're arrested, crucified, and they spread the church, and the church grows and grows and grows. So many Jews in the first century were expecting a military Messiah. We've talked about that before. A Messiah that would come and vanquish Rome, give them peace. The Messiah would be king, and they win, right? And this is not where this story is going here, and that's a challenge. But But again, my question is, what is our Caesarea Philippi? What expectations do we have for the gospel, for Christians to go and what hardwired ideas do we have about what it means to minister to others? So there's some things that we can challenge ourselves with that. So the next thing, he breaks the cultural expectations of shame. Love this. We go from denial, Peter denies Jesus 3 times, and there's shame. The crucifixion, there's sadness, confusion. It says Peter went home scratching his head thinking, what do these things mean? And then there's resurrection, there's hope, joy, purpose, confidence. That passage in Acts 4:13. Peter, even though he's uneducated, was speaking, and they concluded, oh, he's been with Jesus. That's what's going on there. And then the charcoal fire, this is where the smell thing comes in. We're going to dig into that. So Jesus predicts that Peter will deny him 3 times. And Peter, in classic Peter fashion, is like, no, I won't. And so then they fall asleep. Jesus is betrayed and arrested, and Peter takes his sword out and cuts off this dude's ear. His name is Malchus. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see Malchus in heaven, because that's a big deal. First off, how do you cut someone's ear off, right? You got shoulders in the way. You don't just hold still while I cut. So Peter is going for his head, and Malchus is just ducks and loses his ear. Jesus picks it up, sticks it on, and he's good to go. He goes home. Malchus, hey, honey, how's your day? Wow. You know what I mean? Anyway, so, and then in that context, after Peter takes the ear off, he denies Jesus 3 times. But now what does he deny? Think about this carefully. He's not denying he's the Messiah. He's not denying he's God. All the questions were, you were with him. You know him. I saw you with him. And he's like, no, I wasn't there. I don't know him. So be careful with what you think he's denying. He's just denying proximity, because Jesus is getting arrested, and Peter, he wants to keep some healthy distance there, okay? So he does deny him, and that leads us to the crucifixion. Can you even imagine the shame that Peter had after denying Christ, which led to Christ's crucifixion? This is their friend. What did the other disciples, how did they look at Peter the day after the crucifixion? You're the one. You can't stand some heat. Well, what is that? It's your fault. Can you imagine the shame? Peter, it says in the text, he went home wondering what these things mean. They're confused. The guilt and the shame would have been unimaginable. So Peter is a guy, he follows Jesus for a while. He runs away from Jesus when there's a threat. And then some middle school girl asks him a simple question, and he melts down. I don't know what you're talking about, okay? But then you have the resurrection, and that's the turning point for Peter, all right? That's where he gains his confidence and everything else. So I'm going to flip over to John 21, because John 21 has the same story, but a lot of more details about some fishing that we need to check out here, okay? John 18, there's the account of Peter's denial. Now this is really, really interesting, because John 18, the servants had made a charcoal fire because it was cold. They were warming themselves. Peter was with them, standing warming himself. This is the context of Peter's denial. And the servant girl, hey, I saw you. You talk like him. No, I don't know. And then the rooster crows. A couple chapters later, well, we gotta follow this here, because it's just classic. So Jesus, the day was breaking. Okay, they fished at night. I don't know if you know this, but the fishing nets were made of rope. They don't have nylon, so the rope is visible. So they fish at night, so the fish can't see the ropes, okay? So that's why it says, as day was breaking, they were finished fishing. They fished all night, and Jesus stood on the shore. The disciples didn't know it was Jesus. Jesus says, children, do you have any fish? Seems like a bit of a jab. I don't know, but anyway. And they're like, no. Okay, again, check the vocational counselor at high school. Doesn't seem like you listened to what the vocational counselor said. They can never catch fish. Anyway. And Jesus says, well, cast the net on the right side of the boat. What? What is the what? It's water. okay. They do it, and they caught so many fish they couldn't haul it in. The disciple whom Jesus loved, therefore, said to Peter, it's the Lord. This is John. When Simon Peter heard it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and he throws himself into the sea. He just can't wait to get to Jesus. Okay, now remember the last time Jesus did a miracle with fish, Peter's like, oh, Lord, get away from me, for I am a sinful man. He was running away from Jesus. Now there's this miracle, and the fish are caught, and Peter's like, I want to go to you. The difference is the power of the resurrection and his experience of forgiveness, okay? So that's priceless. And so they swam about 100 yards to shore. They got to land. They saw a charcoal fire in place. The only two times in John there are charcoal fires are here and here. The denial and the reaffirmation. And this is what I'm wondering, if Jesus is, first off, does it fit your mental image of Jesus that he can make a fire? Jesus is an outdoor kind of Messiah. I love that, okay? He can make a fire, no problem. So, but Jesus, it seems, is concerned about not only reinstating Peter, but of cleansing his memory. Psychologists tell us that smell is the strongest of the senses to produce memories and recall memories. Have you ever had that happen? You smell something and you're like, boom, here I am, 1978, I remember that. For me, one of the earliest, this sounds weird, but the smell of two-stroke motorcycle exhaust. I used to take my little Honda 70 down to a field in Lincoln and ride around, and all these other big boys had their motocross bikes, and the smell of that exhaust, I just associate that with so much fun. And I know that's weird, but still, you know what I mean? The smell of maybe it's something else. They say when you're selling a house, bake some brownies, and the smell, okay, whatever. Anyway, so smell is a big deal. So here, I'm just wondering if Jesus is thinking, man, Peter, from this day on, the rest of your life, every single time you're by a fire, and in that culture that happened quite a bit, you're going to be reminded of John 18, the denial, because you were there by the fire, warming yourself, and that's when you denied me. So I just wonder if it's Jesus' kindness and compassion. He makes a fire. He's like, hey, Peter, come here by the fire. I got 3 questions for you. Do you love me? Do you love me? Okay, do you see where I'm going? And so how can we do the same thing? We can redeem someone's memory. And here's another story. When my kids were little, Micah was maybe 4, I don't know how old, but we got a Volkswagen van, and I ordered these neat mag wheels and tires from California. And so it's a big deal, right? When I get there, of course, they're big round things. They don't come in a box. They just take 2 cardboard discs, sandwich them, and then put nylon straps around them. So they came, UPS guy comes. First off, don't you just love the UPS guy, right? Everyone loves the UPS guy. And so I said, hey, Micah, come and help me. Here's a utility knife. Come help me. Okay, yeah. And he didn't cut the tires or anything, but, he gets down and just starts cutting through. And yeah, he cut through the cardboard pretty quick and scratched the neat VW emblem. And, I kind of reacted, too strongly. And then I realized, man, I don't want him to associate my freak out with the van every time he sees it. And so that memory I was able to redeem. And I go, hey, I got down. I'm like, hey, Micah, you know what? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have given you the knife. I should have told you, and it's no big deal. We're going to get hit, gravel roads and tree. We're going to bang these things up. And so I just really cleansed that memory so he doesn't remember Dad's freak out with that item. Now, I know you all have items. I have more items. I was really mad at Donna once. This is like a long time ago. I went to Menards and bought a tool. That's going to fix it, isn't it? You know what I mean? And so I still have that tool. I don't even know if she knows that story, but I'm like, I think, yeah, there it is. It's just a little token of my idiocy of just. And so we have these things, and so in relationships, so valuable to be open to how can we redeem that memory from that person so they don't associate this with guilt and shame, okay? And bless them and forgive and release them. You see what I'm saying? So I'll leave that with you to see if there's anything you can do there. But I think that's what's going on here with smell. He's publicly reaffirming Peter for obvious reasons, but it goes beyond that. There's not much real estate up here, and I lost, there it is. Lost the pointer. Okay, so the fire, yeah, he denies Jesus near a charcoal fire. He enjoys breakfast and a threefold affirmation by a charcoal fire on the beach. And so that's powerful in front of the other people. Because again, the other disciples, they need to be led by Jesus. Peter's okay. I accept him, you accept him. All right? So you got anybody in your family that's kind of pushed out, you might need to just publicly, hey, come over here. Uncle Chuck? Yeah, the family knows you're the weird one, but come in here. We love you, we accept you. See, you might need to publicly do something like that to pull in so everyone's like, oh, we talk to him now. Just simple, all right? Number 3, Jesus breaks expectations of what it means to follow him. Now, this is really profound. What does it mean to follow Jesus? Does it mean that I'm perfect? No. Does it mean that I have everything figured out? No. Does it mean, you get the picture, okay? Remember a couple of weeks ago we had that Jesus says to Peter, follow me, and that whole rabbinical educational system, remember that? And how Peter's a fisherman, which means he's been rejected, kicked out, he's a loser, and that might be one reason why he's so quick to go with a rabbi, even though he's a bit of a Lone Ranger rabbi. Doesn't matter, I'm out of here, I'm going to follow this rabbi, okay? Well, Jesus seems to be kind of countercultural. In fact, I didn't mention this, but Caesarea Philippi, rabbis of that day said no good rabbi would go to Caesarea Philippi. Okay, right there, countercultural. Jesus goes right there. And he's parking it where nobody, so he's very countercultural in what he does. So, a couple reasons, a couple things going on here. Jesus is affirming Peter because he's dealing with the loss of the expected military Messiah. Now think about this. If you're Jesus, no one has really ever understood your plan. Even though you've told them over and over and over, and it happened, just like you told them. You're dead, you rise from the dead, and they're like, what does this mean? I have no idea. I don't get it. Okay, anyway. And so their expectation of the military Messiah, that's not shaping up. I mean, Jesus doesn't win over the Romans. The Romans are still in power. We're still abused. They're still stealing our money. What kind of victory is this? I thought, Jesus, you said a kingdom. Kingdom needs a king. We want free food. Come. Okay? So they're thinking physical kingdom. Jesus has always been talking a spiritual kingdom. They just didn't get that, okay? But Jesus he needs to know, hey, so this is really what I'm doing here. I'm after a spiritual kingdom. Is that a deal breaker for you disciples? Are you with me? Do you love me, Peter? Do you love me? Do you love me? Or do you understand here? I'm not going to be a king physically. I'm on a whole other wavelength, and so is this a deal breaker? He needs to clarify that. And even after the resurrection, Acts 1:4, check this verse out. They gathered around Jesus and asked him, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom of Israel? They still don't get it. They're like, we want a king. Restore the Romans. Get them out of here. They just do not understand. Okay, so I think Jesus is reaffirming Peter to deal with their loss and how they're processing. I'm not who you think I am. I'm not really doing what you think I'm doing, and that's rich. Is God ever surprising us with the things that he does or doesn't do? And are we okay with that? What he's saying to Peter is that you're going to have to completely reformulate your understanding of my identity. You're going to have to give up a lot of things, Peter. I'm not who you think I am. I am who I've been saying I am. You just see that through a lens that's just difficult for you to understand, okay? But can you completely reframe your expectations of who God is? Can you do that? You're going to need to do that. And so he's leading them along the way, okay? So there's no happy Disney ending. Jesus is questioning, how does your devotion hold up in light of this? I'm not going to win like you think I'm going to win. I'm going to win like I need to win. In fact, my victory is way bigger than just the Romans. It's over sin, death, and darkness. Okay? Anyway, was Peter ready to love Jesus as Jesus was, not as Peter shaped him to be? So, man, in our culture, we have so many American versions of Jesus and God, right? And we're just as messed up as Peter. Jesus told him over and over and over, and there's like, what? And I challenge you to think, how does our culture shape our vision of who Jesus is? And it's a very productive, materialistic culture. So Jesus blesses me with material goods. He blesses me with good relationships and a promotion at work, okay? And maybe, yes, maybe, but it's not essential. So if those things don't happen, don't blame it on Jesus, okay? That's what I'm saying. We have to think through that because our culture does shape how we understand things. So Peter denies Jesus 3 times, and then Jesus asks him very specific questions. Do you love me? And Jesus says this, do you love me more than these other guys? Because Peter's always been saying, I'll never leave you. I'm doing this. I'll always be with you. And Jesus is, he's just, I love it, the directness. Hey, Peter, do you love me more than these guys? Yeah. Okay, good. Feed my lambs. He goes on and on and on. And this is where Jesus is turning Peter from a fisher of fish to a fisher of men. Lambs? Well, I'm a fisherman. Yeah, I know. It's metaphorical, Peter. People, sheep, shepherd, lamb. Okay, anyway. And so, and then he goes on, do you love me? Tend my sheep. Do you love me? Feed my sheep. And if you've studied this passage, you're aware that there's some different words for love that are used here, and some people make a big deal of this. I dug into that a little bit, and it just seems that, first off, this is all probably spoken in Aramaic, so the gospel writers are putting it from Aramaic into Greek, and John uses those 2 different words for love synonymously in other places, so I'm not a big fan of drilling down and going, well, this response means this, and that response means that. The point is, Jesus is reinstating Peter, and in front of the others, hearing him say, I love you, I love you, I love you, minister, minister, minister. Guys, you hear that? He's back on board. Treat him as an equal. I think there's that public reaffirmation. So we're not going to look at Peter funny anymore. We're going to drop the Peter jokes, all right? And so we're just going to pull him back into the circle. So he had to give up his preconceived notions, and I think that's a challenge for us to do that, but it's necessary, right? So, publicly reinstating Peter, why? 3 reasons. To save him from a lifetime of shame. Is there someone in your circle, maybe it's you, do you have shame hanging around your neck? Jesus can deal with shame, and sometimes we have to just go back every day because it just kind of comes back to us, okay? Maybe there's someone in your circle of influence that you can free. Maybe you're empowered to free someone from shame by just connecting some people around and going, hey, Uncle Chuck is back in the circle. Drop the Uncle Chuck jokes, all right? Whatever it may be. Are you cut off from family? Number 2, to publicly restore Peter among the disciples. Sometimes, I must say, most of the time, there's some weirdness in family relationships, some pain and some hurt and some separation. Well, again, we may not be able to fix all of those things, but as far as we're concerned, we need to be forgiving, open, healed from Jesus so we can love those people, all right? And finally, model forgiveness and restoration to the disciples. Okay, guys, this is what it looks like to follow me. You take people who have failed massively, and you think this is the only time that Peter failed? He's going to fail again and again and again, and so the disciples are like, oh, hey, we need to forgive again. How many times? 77, 490? Yeah, no, just forever, okay? That's what's going on. So, I love this passage. I'm challenged, first off, with the Caesarea Philippi concept. It's like, what do we think of? Oh, that's just too evil. That's just too off limits. And again, there are limits, but Jesus' church can thrive anywhere, okay? In China, the XXX church is a big deal, just anywhere, okay? So that calls me to question some of my stereotypes and my boundaries and allow Jesus to minister to people in places that I might not be comfortable with. And then you've got the thing here about reaffirmation and the smell concept of how we can redeem people and how we can move people towards grace and forgiveness, even with tangible things. Just think about that. What What is there, a tangible thing that you can heal a memory with through the power of the Spirit? We're not going to run around and do that. But Peter was turned, he was affirmed, and from that moment on, every time he smelled a campfire, don't you think? He's reminded of chapter 21 and not chapter 18. Yeah, Jesus reaffirmed me. I'm okay. Powerful, powerful memory, all right? So I'm going to close up in prayer and just pray that we can be the people that draw others to Christ, even through healing some memories. Lord, thank you for your work in our lives. Thank you for your work in Peter's life, and just what a great example you are of love and unconditional forgiveness. Taking Peter where he was, around those disciples, around a campfire, knowing that it was around a campfire he denied you, and you so graciously pulled him back, affirmed him, charged him with ministry. So wherever we are with shame or being cut off from people, we give that pain to you. We ask for healing, for restoration. We also want to have eyes, Lord, that see other people and ask, how can we empower them and pull them back in with dignity, with respect and forgiveness? And so that might be hard, but we pray for your strength and your grace as we move in that direction. We want to be like you. We love you. Thank you for loving us on our worst day. Amen.